Hey everybody, and welcome to Share Truth Apply Scripture. I am Jordan Chambly, joined by Wesley Wildmon and Walker Wildmon. And that's exciting because, Walker, every time we've got you in studio, I always know it's going to be a great show. It's going to be a great program.
Yeah, it's been a few months, but I'm glad to be back.
And the challenge is for you not to get us
Confused, yeah. I'll just call you Mr. Wildman and Mr. Wildman.
Well, you don't get it wrong.
But I'm glad to have you in. As I always said, it's always great to have you here. We always look forward to having you on the program. You bring a lot of wisdom to the table, literally.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And again, you go ahead. Sorry.
Walker, tell them what you do at AFA, and then also tell them
Yeah.
the program that you do on the weekends.
Yes, my title here at American Family Association is Vice President of Operations. That's my daily job, or my daytime job. And then I also do a radio show on the weekend, Exposing Washington.
Okay.
Airs each Saturday at 1:30 p.m. Central. So I actually just got done recording that for tomorrow. I'm sorry, for Saturday. Tomorrow's Friday. We got July 4th, July 3rd off. So, that's what I do here at American Family Radio, and I enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, that's great.
And if you heard anything in the background, that was me interrupting my brother because I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was okay, right?
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, we're good.
We're good. We're fine. So today, as everyone knows who's listening to this program today on this Saturday, it is the 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
And that looks very different this year than previous years. I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now. Not just politically, but just practically. There's a lot of things going on that people trying to be safe with the quarantine, the social distancing, the mask wearing, the restrictions that have been placed on us, not going into stores without the proper precautions and stuff. So, but then you have other things going on in our country. A lot of confusion as to what is acceptable in our society, what is honoring something, what is remembering something. What are the appropriate ways to do these things? What are the appropriate ways to protest these things? It's confusion out there.
And what not appropriate ways.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so, my question for you guys. This is just the opening.
Then you have the Declaration of Chaz and Chop,
which has been apparently erased and dismantled.
Yes.
Very effectively, I have to say, and. Finally, it should have been done a long time ago, but finally it's been done. So, my question is, how do we, with a positive mindset, celebrate today, this 4th of July?
Well, there's been some bad protesters, if you want to call them protesters, or rioters, or anarchists, like the people who invaded downtown Seattle and established their own little autonomous zone. That's the bad part of America. But the good part of America is that we actually live in a country where you can protest.
Exactly.
We actually live in a country where you can protest about things you don't like, whether I disagree with your position or not, or whether I think that your position is wrong.
Right.
We all have the right to protest. So that's what makes America great. That's what makes America special. And we've got to appreciate that. But a lot of the people who are protesting nowadays and destroying cities, they want to do away with the First Amendment. They want to do away with that right to protest unless you agree with them. Yeah. So, but what makes America special, what makes us to where we can be thankful for this July 4th, is that we live in a country where we can freely share our opinions.
Yeah.
And that's under the First Amendment, obviously.
Yeah.
The freedom to protest. And what's interesting, though, is that these rioters, these protesters, are exercising. They're going beyond their reasonable ability to exercise by vandalizing, by destroying private property.
Which does not fall under the First Amendment.
Which was not fall under the First Amendment. You have the freedom of
assembly,
speech, and the freedom of assembly, but you don't have the freedom to exercise everything.
Yeah, to vandalize other people's property, to steal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it is ironic, though, that they're fighting for something which ultimately you're fighting to lose what you're fighting for. Is that kind of a little bit confusing?
I wonder if people even know what they're fighting for anymore.
That's a good point.
There's like you said, it's chaos, it's anarchy out there, and anarchy, the definition is there's no rules, there's no leader.
Sure.
So, I wonder if they even know.
Yeah, and we live in a country where where we can elect our leaders, and we're very, very much controlled by the people, and that's why our Constitution and Declaration of Independence emphasizes that we, the people, are in charge of our country. So, really, really, that's good and bad. We can elect bad leaders, and in some states and cities where some of this this anarchy is going on and lawlessness, you have just bad leaders that aren't taking control of the situation. But we still live in a country where you can change your leadership, so that's a good thing also to celebrate.
And that shows you the value of an opposing viewpoint. So say that, I mean, who knows, we might be wrong about something.
Sure.
And we might vote for a leader who stands for that thing. Thankfully, there's someone out there who disagrees with us and can pull us back from that wrong. So there's, generally speaking, always going to be a voice that's at least more right than other people.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what's, that's what I think is being missed today, is that instead of spending our time trying to convince our neighbors that our viewpoint, whatever that is the right viewpoint, assuming it's right, then instead of doing that, a lot of our country is just spending our time shutting people down, shutting conversation down, shutting debate down, firing employees because they posted something on Twitter that was against the narrative of the day. So that's a problem that we're facing right now, is not squashing debate, not squashing viewpoints.
And
we've got
exchange of ideas.
That's right. We've got to keep that, even if the viewpoints aren't what we like.
Yeah,
exactly.
So within the First Amendment, we've got the things that we mentioned that are very things to be reminded of in light of so far a bad 2020. Overall, it's just bad. Let's just be honest.
Yes.
And a lot of it being as bad as it is, America is still exceptional in the sense that we've had the same Constitution for over 230 years, where many other places around the world, there's some countries around the world where the baby boomers in that country have been under a minimum of 6 constitutions.
Yeah.
So think about the change and the chaos that would take place under an ongoing change in the Constitution. Now, there's some loopholes in ours that people take advantage of, and we certainly express some of our issues because America is not perfect, but it is exceptional, and it is far better, I would say. And I can say this, even being an American, because I've visited 6 or 8 different countries, some of the most progressive, some of the most communist. I've been to China, worked with the underground church there, and so I've seen a lot of different parts of the country, some of the worst parts of the country, and America is by far, in my opinion, the best for one, religious liberty. That's another thing. In other parts of the world, you don't have religious liberty. And in some cases, it's a theocracy.
Yeah.
And whatever their religion is what you have to submit to, or you're alienated or ostracized or even put in prison or killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the greatest things about our Constitution is the fact that when it lays out the rights, I mean, what does it say about the rights? It says these are given to us by God,
That's right.
and these are inalienable.
Right.
So in our constitutional documents, in our governmental documents, it says the government doesn't give you any of these things.
Right.
Therefore, the government can't take away any of these things. And that, I really think, is one of the biggest reasons America is unique, and one of the reasons that this Constitution has lasted as long as it has, because it works for everyone.
Sure.
Yeah.
It really does. It works for everyone.
Works for everyone. And you also, next, and I know we got some other things we want to get to,
sure.
but one other thing that sets us unique is our Second Amendment, following the First Amendment, which is our right to protect ourselves and preserve ourselves.
Yeah.
And to protect ourselves, both from tyrannical government, but also for our self-preservation for someone who would seek to harm us personally, individually. And that's unique because I've been to other parts of the world where their violent crime is 8-10 times more than what ours is. That's because some of the most vulnerable among them, women, the elderly, children, aren't able to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Or their parents aren't able to protect themselves from violent offenders.
Yeah.
And also, too, I've always said, and I'm not saying that I support that the first opportunity to take up arms and go against the government, I'm not saying that's the first approach of,
Definitely.
Definitely not the first approach. However, if the movement in China, the groundswell over there did have the Second Amendment, or they had it from the very beginning, I can assure you that it wouldn't have got as bad as it is today, because I believe America, if we didn't have our Second Amendment, then I believe that our government would have, within the last 100 years, we would have easily gone to become a more communist direction, and a more oppressive nation, whatever that would look like. But the Second Amendment changes things for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to see that in the light of the environment that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution came from, because you had these men, the founding fathers, who really saw an invasion of their own country as a colony of the King of England. He would send his soldiers in. They would do whatever they wanted to. They could They could force people out of their homes. They could do and there was no respect for the citizen. There was no respect for the citizen. And when they saw that, that was obviously in their minds. Like, we felt violated. Therefore, we understood we have an innate right to defend ourselves. Defend ourselves.
Liberty. Yeah, you know, the founders understood very well what tyranny looked like, because they came from tyranny in Great Britain. And they, even some, human nature is to seek protection, is to seek safety at all cost. And sometimes people seek kings for safety. And you saw that even in the early days of our country, where some founding fathers and some people who were involved in the American Revolution were trying to actually talk George Washington into being the king of America, of the 13 colonies. And he said, no, basically, I'm summarizing, he said, no, that's a horrible idea. We just came from a king, and we want to get away from that. So, no, I will not be your king. I'll be your president, who you elect, and then you can unseat me if I don't do a good job. So, yeah, we have to be careful, and that's what's really concerning about what we're seeing now in our culture, where there's a lot of anarchy and lawlessness. That actually leads to tyranny. That actually leads to totalitarian governments. But you would think the opposite. Well, it's chaos. No, somebody's got to bring order.
Somebody's got to bring order.
We don't need to let anarchy and chaos continue to such an extent where people are looking around going, where is our dictator, where is our king to bring order?
Because what we have, what the Founding Fathers gave us in the Constitution, which again, Constitution not perfect, but it is very, very, very good in comparison to other countries, because it does do a dispersion of power in the three branches. Now the three branches switched. It was originally that the Supreme Court was supposed to be the least amount of power among the three, but now it's got the most. Now there has been, the legislative branch is supposed to be the closest to the people. They're supposed to be the one that has the most power. However, while it has switched in many ways, it still has its dispersion and its checks and balances, which in other countries they don't have. So I would say, while we would say in America, in some portions of America, depending on the situations, the wheel of justice may spin slower than others. However, it does spin, and in India it does not spin. There is no justice. The wheel of justice does not spin in India. I've been there, and so it is so that is another benefit, something to be reminded about, the checks and balances and the Constitution that we have. Out of the 55 signers of the Constitution, over 65% of them had seminary degrees. So the founding of our country had a heavy emphasis on the value of human life, the value of the family, the role of the government in the citizen's life. The scriptures had a lot of influence in that, because many of our founding fathers were Christians. And had an emphasis on scripture.
And what a gift that is to think about. Just almost traveling back in time and thinking about, like, the men who were involved had their hands directly in the founding of our country. Even if, yes, and I understand not all the founding fathers were even Christian. But around them, there were people who dedicated their lives to the service of the Lord, but also to the Word, and prayed over this thing.
Mm-hmm.
This was not something that a group of they were a group of ragtag rebels, but they weren't troublemakers who got together to put together a pact to keep their gang in order.
Yeah.
This was something that was a gift from God. And when you think about the progression of our country and what has happened since then, this is a sought-after sanctuary.
Yeah.
I mean, as bad as it has been in the past,
Sure.
and I'm not saying that it hasn't had dark times, and
Sure.
it doesn't still sometimes have
Absolutely.
dark times where people suffer. This really, in comparison with the rest of the world, is a sanctuary and a safe place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Canada and many other places, you're fined or even put in prison for certain speeches.
Wow. Yeah.
Not actions,
Mhm.
just by certain language you use. And so that's
Yeah.
important to remember that. I know we talked about that early in the program.
Yeah, America, the one stain I think about, or really two, I think of slavery and then I think of abortion.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the two greatest stains in our country, and one of them still going on, abortion.
Yeah.
We can change that. Now, I'm frustrated. I get frustrated at how difficult it is to change it. We have things like the Supreme Court that get in the way of actually the will of the people
Right.
on various occasions. Wesley, you mentioned that. But we can still fight to change that, to end that.
Yeah.
And there is hope there. And but in other countries, in a lot of countries, there's just no hope. There's no way to make change come about.
Exactly.
And you have the religious freedom to minister to people and to set up safe havens, like pregnancy centers,
Yeah.
the ability to raise money for ultrasounds. There's things that you can do in America to minister to and to make a difference, beyond just legislatively, that you couldn't do in other countries as well.
Yeah.
We know people that, and we partner with what's the preborn,
Yeah.
AFR, AFA, and Engage. We partner with preborn once a year, and they set up ultrasounds for free for those that would want to. And we know that it's over 80% now of the mothers that see the ultrasound of their baby keep their baby. They change their mind on what they intended on doing through abortion. So we get the privilege here in America to do those types of things and minister to those. And we also send out more missionaries than any other country in the world. And the only reason we do so, or the only reason we are able to, is because of the religious liberty aspect of our country. Now I know we could all point to cases where that's being challenged, but the reality is it still exists. And we still have the ability to fight for it and keep it and maintain it. So but just remember to insert your rights that you have when you can and how you can. Insert your rights, because if you don't insert them and use them, then they're giving the other team an opportunity to take it away.
Yeah, and it is those rights that I feel like today, we can celebrate. I mean, this is not just a historical event that we're remembering, the birth of our country. While that it is very much worth celebrating, we are celebrating those opportunities that we have, that we're
That's
able
right.
to right now, where you're sitting, where you're standing, you're able to make a difference because you have a power here.
Yep.
And it's it's the ability to vote. It's the ability to pass on ideas and information freely, or should be freely anyway. It's the ability to worship the way you please, and to evangelize, and to reach out in helpful ways too, to be a humanitarian, to go and to places of disasters and to go help clean up. There's a lot of countries where you just simply you are an asset.
Yeah.
You are an asset, and you
another
can't
citizen.
do anything. You're a unit. You're a bit of information.
That's right. Yeah, and we're really, America is responsible for exporting freedom throughout the world. I mean, we've seen that through various world wars, and even today, not only do we export aid, humanitarian aid, send out the most missionaries, and also a lot of private entities send out tons of foreign aid and do various mission work. For all people. They serve all people across the world.
Especially during natural disasters.
Yeah, exactly. And but also we export freedom to other countries, and we have to keep that, because if you travel around the world, people who are oppressed, many of them who have either heard about America, experienced America personally, or read about it, they will say that America is basically it. The beacon, last beacon of hope standing in the world is America for freedom.
Yeah, you think about the creativity of America and the ability to patent your ideas. Think about the ability to protect your private property. I mean, the fact that you even have private property. You know, in many parts of the world, private property doesn't exist. It's the government's, or they say it's yours, but when it's inconvenient for them, then they take it by force. And so you do have private property in the United States that many people, these are blessings that we can take for granted in light of all that's going on. It's easy to take these things for granted, but private property, the ability to create your own business, your small private property. In America, you become your own boss. In other parts of the world, you can't become your own boss.
Well, I think about the American companies now. They're like making the headlines, and okay, I'm kind of a space geek. I like space and rockets and going to Mars and stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you have never heard me talk about it ever. But so I think about a company like SpaceX, and for the past decade, we haven't launched a rocket to or an astronaut to the space station from American soil.
Right.
Yes.
Until SpaceX.
Yeah.
And that's
not
the government.
Entity.
That is a private entity. That is not the government. The government couldn't do it.
Yeah. So the greatest innovation is fueled by private entities, private minds, and it's just great to see. And our even our government has been responsible for some of the greatest advances, but it's footed by the taxpayer dollars, and it's American citizens
really us,
thinking of these things.
Exactly.
American innovation has really brought the world along in great ways, and we've really improved. I was looking at some studies a few years ago. America has exported not just aid and humanitarian help, but really we've brought much of the world out of poverty. The poverty rate throughout the world continues to decrease, meaning more people are coming out of that poverty. And a lot of it has to do with a global trade. I'm not a globalist, but the reality is when America's economy is so big that it affects other countries, and we buy product from other countries, and they buy product from us, so on and so forth. So that being said, America's economy and our wealth has really spread throughout the world and brought a lot of people out of poverty.
Yeah, and I read one time where while America makes up 4% of the world population, they're actually responsible for 25% of the goods in the country, in the world.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
So if you think about that for a second, it would make more sense if 4% of the population made up 4% of the world's goods, but to make up a quarter of the world's goods and 4% of the population, that tells you that we're able to do things and make more out of the things that we are given, and making the most use of our stuff.
Yeah, it multiplies here rather than just sort of. I think it was it Karl Marx who said, to everyone according to need, from everyone according to their ability. Sounds nice on paper, doesn't work. But again, that doesn't multiply, and that doesn't help anyone.
Right.
What we have here in our country is a system that multiplies and overflows, and I can't help but think like that is just a blessing.
Sure.
Because when this country was founded on Christian principles with so much respect for God and for His authority in our lives, and as the church has been free to exercise that and to express it, I can't help but think all of these things are just a blessing because of that.
Yeah.
Because of that.
With the couple minutes we got left, let's go around the table here and share maybe one or two things that we can do individually and we can challenge our listening audience to do that would, in light of, we just shared a drop in the bucket of things that are positive and that are make American exceptional over the last 200 and plus years. So we've talked about those. We've also briefly mentioned at the beginning some of the problems we're facing today in our country. What are some things that we can do with the problems that we're facing today to make a difference in our country?
Yeah, well, first we need to appreciate it, and we've mentioned that before, but we don't need to take for granted what we have. That leads me to saying that we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity we have to utilize our freedom and our rights, and that means voting, that means knowing what's going on at the local level with your city council, with your mayor, with your governor, so on and so forth. We need to be involved in all of those things with civil government, but we also need to be very intentional with educating our children and those around us on on our rights
Yes.
and our liberties and where they came from and why we need to protect them.
Hey,
Yes.
you can read the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. You can read that in about 4.5 minutes. You read the Constitution in less than 30. So we need to read it. So just
Absolutely.
to add on to what you, and
sure.
our producer is going to add a couple links. We have here at AFA and AFR and Engage, we have a handful of resources that we provide. OneUseNow.com, AFA Action. There's a couple things that we do to provide you tangible ways to be involved. And our producer is going to put those links in the podcast page at
Right.
engagemagazine.net.
Yeah. Well, I think too, one of the things that we can do is to, like you said, Wesley, to make sure that we're exercising the rights, our God-given rights that we have, but also making sure that everyone else around us at least has that opportunity and is aware that they have that opportunity. And I think that that effect will multiply as well. And even if it's somebody who you don't agree with, don't suppress their right to speak.
Sure.
Invite conversation, be honest and be respectful. Allow them to speak, and then you come with the
Listen,
truth.
sure, yeah. Good point.
In a biblical way, convince them.
Yeah. Well, mine will be twofold. One, kind of what you were saying, you got to be able to engage the conversation, be polite, be respectful. But the most important thing is be equipped, be studied up, be prepared on the issues, and don't be intimidated by someone who would call names or that would get in your face or whatever it is. Don't be intimidated, because as Christians, we are disciples of Christ. We're conveying truth. We do this because we love people. And second, and the most important thing, is to love your family, be a good example in your community, serve your local church, and be prepared to be a witness.
Yeah. Well, and I think this has been a great episode. I'm encouraged.
Yes.
And I'm going to go out and celebrate with my family, and I hope you do too. Thanks, Walker, for being on the show with us.
What about
Glad
me?
to be on.
Yeah, Wesley, thank you so
Hey,
much
you're
for
on
being on the
every
show
week.
with us. And as always, the most important thing you can do is share truth and apply Scripture. We'll see you next week.